Hello everyone, and welcome back to On Hit Effect for the second Enigma deck tech in a row. This time I am joined by my wonderful teammate from Team Ascent, Brian. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great. How are you? Happy to be here.
I'm doing pretty good. I think we had a pretty successful Team Ascent outing at US Nationals, which happened over this last weekend. And we're here to talk about just a totally normal Enigma deck list, right? Like, just very
Yeah,
standard.
for sure. Exactly.
We're gonna play some
Exactly
special
standard.
manifestations. You know, maybe make some
Sure.
cats.
No.
Okay.
Get all
so-
that out of there. We need two wards. We just need a mirror guy and a rage specter. No, nothing else.
Brian, are you proposing to cut the bad cards and only play the good cards?
I think we
That's-
should.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, we should at least give it a try, right?
Okay. So what this deck tech is for the deck list that Team Ascent settled on for US Nationals. We played a unified 80 between me, Brian, and Dagan. And we have kind of come to call this Hidden Dragon, the counterpart to Zen's Crouching Tigers, because turns out the two dragons, Rage Spectre and Miragai, are just kind of the best things that the deck can be doing, and it's all we really want to be doing, so let's just survive until we can do those things. So I had a pretty reasonable Nats. I finished 41st, largely carried on the back of going 5-1 in draft, which I'm very proud of. How did that go for you, Brian? How was your Nats run?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I definitely had some favorable matchups day one. So I ended in the top 16, which I'm thrilled with that result.
13th place, in fact.
13th place, yep. But yeah, I went 4-0 CC day one. I was fortunate enough to get paired into Victor New, which I think are both pretty favored matchups.
Yeah.
Especially if the new isn't like adapted to our game plan. I think some of our internal testing against new was a lot closer, but sort of a little bit of surprise and a little bit of just doing things slightly different helped me win those matches at Nats. And then my drafts went 4-2, so pretty good. And then on the second set of CC, I played against Kano, which was super tight against Peter Videnziak. He hit a big pocket of reds. I hit a big pocket of no-go again. It was a weird game. Always is. And then played against Naib's Zen, which was also super tight game. We could talk about that game plan in a bit, but he missed some damage by not closing the combat chain at one point. I ended up like reasonably ahead of that game. I think if that damage had come through, it would have been a lot closer and not clear who would have won that. And then I played a mirror. They dropped a 10k on turn 0. It was not great for me. I almost clawed it back. I got them to 1 and then drew a triple no block in a row. And my double mirror guys got wiped.
Which
Very
is
unfortunate.
especially brutal because we'll get to this in a second, but this deck is designed to block well. Like, all it does is block well.
That's right. So it was really just the 8 chi, which we'll get to in a bit, but 8 chi. But every other card was basically a 3 block or would have let me survive that turn. And I just needed one more blocking card. But that's okay. Maybe I should have taken a different line on the prior turn. But dropped that winning in for top 8 to the mirror to Aaron Grace, who obviously did amazingly. And then played against Andrew Rothermel on stream, and you can see how that game went. We'll talk game plan in a minute, but I found the mirror guy quickly. I could not find Chi, and the scab skins were not going my way.
I heard there were a lot of 2 action point turns that game.
There absolutely were, which was unfortunate, but also, wasn't finding the chi. The deck just wasn't doing the thing that game, and that's fine. But overall, super happy with the weekend. Can't complain. Top 16.
Top 16.
I think there's a lot of interesting future directions for the deck as well. And
Top 16 and a 6-2 record in CC. Wasn't just on the back of draft that you got there, which is always exciting. So let's talk, before we get into the exact deck list, what makes this Enigma list different?
Yeah, so I think we sort of started with like, what is the most powerful thing this hero can do? And that is dropping Mirror Guy. That card is absurd.
Not
if you
close.
pitch the G for manifestations of Mirror Guy, that thing attacks for 8 go again, often 10 if you put an Uphold Tradition on it, and then it wards 5 on defense if you let it die. But it felt like the even stronger thing to do was to do that, full block, let it survive, and then you can just take Tunic and hit him for 10 again.
Yes.
And when you do that, it's very hard to lose those games.
And I think the big level up moment for us was realizing that the best play line was not to traverse to get Chi to play Miragai. It was to Arsenal Miragai, wait until you could transcend, play Miragai, And then on the next turn cycle, use Traverse plus Enigma ability plus Meridian Pathways as kind of block 6 on armor to keep that Mirror Guy alive. And it blocks breakpoints really well.
Yeah,
It's 3 plus
it's
2
like,
plus 1.
exactly, and it's almost a defense reaction, right? You only have to commit 2 block early. So like against things like New, who might go tall or might give it go again and go wide, you can just sort of have that ward 4 as like a, this can cover either of those scenarios. So yeah, I think the weird thing about this deck is like I regularly take an IP1 to put Mirror Guy in Arsenal and just hold a Chi, waiting for the second Chi.
Yeah.
And you can sort of tank value on the early turns while you're finding the Mirror Guy. Because if you do this double attack where you get to attack once, follow up with another attack, and then like block the whole turn, and then swing Mirror Guy again, you just like totally chunk their life total and make up all the value you lost.
And it gets really powerful if on the turn that you play Mirror Guy, you can pair it with any sort of disruption, whether that's Command and Conquer or Dissolve Reality, and we'll get to those in a second, but any way to not let your opponent have a 5-card hand, which just makes it that much harder to kill your Mirror Guy.
It's worth saying as well that sort of those Mirror Guy turns where you're pushing 10 and 10 and then maybe another attack, they're kind of unblockable, because if they give you cards from hand, like you have this equipment set that blocks 7. You've got your Uphold up, you've got the headpiece and the boots, and we just talked about how those block 6 together for free. So if they give you any cards, it's very hard for them to push back through your entire hand of blocks plus the 7 equipment. So they just sort of have to take all the damage and then try to push through. Otherwise, you're going to get 3-4 swings out of this Mirror Guy, and that's how the game can really spiral.
And it's important to note that in all of the in-between turns where we're not killing our opponent with 1 resource for 10 power, this really is kind of like a Guardian cosplay deck, I would say. We're just, a lot of turn cycles just block 6, attack for 7, block 6, Phantasmaclasm, and just really efficiently trading damage and disrupting our opponents to keep yourself alive.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of the ways these games play out is like, first phase of the game, we trade a little damage, maybe they go to 30 and we go to like 16 or 10, right? We're just sort of blocking and not doing super efficient plays and like slowly leaking life. And then you do your Mirror Guy thing, and they take unblockable-ish damage from like 30 down to like 5.
Yeah.
And then they clear your Mirror Guy, and then you play an endgame where like you're at 10, they're at 5, and you have all these hyper-efficient attacks. Plus, you have a crazy hero power that basically says, make a shield, right? Attack for 2, and then ward 1 on defense. But if they can't clear that shield, you get to just keep attacking with it for free. So you can sort of grind out these endgames that other heroes don't quite have that capability.
So that's kind of like the general idea behind the deck. Let's talk about what kind of cards we're looking at here. If we look at our arena cards, our equipment and weapons, I mean, we've got the standard loadout you'll see in most matchups. Cosmo, Fiendo's Spring Tunic, Uphold Tradition, Meridian Pathway, and, of course, Traverse the Universe, which I think is in contention for just the most powerful legendary in the game at this point, which is crazy to say in a world where Tunic exists.
I'd say so. Hands down. I mean, it's like a balance of justice that just like always draws a card whenever you want it, and not just a card, like a crazy card that enables all of your other things.
We do have some spicy stuff in here. Norrøn Robe. Norrøn Robe we'll talk about later when we get to Kano.
Indeed.
Not Norrøn Gloves, which was certainly a choice that we made, and it sounds like it paid off for you. I think both of us actually beat Kanos in the Swiss rounds. Early on, seemed like it was a very good matchup for Enigma. I think now the current public perception is that, if Kano knows how to pitch stack, the matchup is very favored for them. I think we've kind of cracked it, but we'll talk about that later.
I think so. I mean, just to add to that, like a week out from the event, I was like maybe about to pivot to Prism just because of how bad this Kano matchup was. We just could not win. Like it was
bad.
It was so bad.
Yeah.
And then we added in this sideboard package, and then suddenly we couldn't lose.
Then the spicy one, Waves of Aquamarine.
We weren't the only ones to come across this. I saw this in Aaron's Grace list too.
Bit of parallel evolution there, or convergent deck building. But walk me through what's going on with this draft common in our Enigma deck list.
So I mean, this is just a Zen. It's basically currently just in for Zen. We have a lot of 2-cost things that disrupt Zen. We'll see when we get to those cards. But just to call them out, it's Amnesia, Command and Conquer, and Weakest Link. All have pretty crushing effects into Zen. And if they block 6 on any one of those effects, you can just get them with this.
Yeah.
You just pump it to 7. I mean, they don't have defense reactions. Like, they can play a defensive Art of War, great. And you push through a crazy hit effect. So in the Zen game I played against Naive, he blocked 6 with Traverse, the Tunic, Kasaya, and the Shuko against my weakest link. And so, found his chi, and then I just gave it +1. And
then it goes right away.
He discards, I draw a card. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Not bad. So I think the other thing as we get to the Zen matchup, Miragai, that's not a matchup where you can protect Miragai. Right? Because we can block 7 on board plus like 12 from our hand, but Zen can push like 30. Like we cannot count on Miragai surviving that turn.
And so
the Uphold Tradition doesn't get that much value. It really gets like it gets like 3 value, right? 2 on Miragai and 1 on defense. Waves gets +1 and then 1 on defense, so that's base 2 value. But if you push any on hit effect through, you're going crazy.
If you draw on weakest link,
discard a chi, draw a card was
we're talking about
good.
like 8. Yeah. Okay, so the first kind of class of cards in the deck that you mentioned already are our 2-cost disruptive attack actions. These are Weakest Link, Command and Conquer, and Amnesia. Very tailored for Zen here. Of course, CNC is good in any matchup, particularly brutal in the mirror, because a lot of Enigmas are playing no blocks and D-reacts right now. But these attacks, I think, really are just about surviving until we can do the thing, and then making sure our opponent doesn't have a 5-card hand when we do the thing.
And I think you'll be surprised at how many matchups Amnesia is in for. Like, it looks like a Zen hate card in the sideboard, but, I played into KO, played into all this stuff, that it just fits the cost curve, right? It blocks 3, it does the thing. If you can play Miragai into Amnesia, like, you don't care about the hit effect, but it's still sort of this, like, unblockable-ish damage that I was talking about, where, you present this 14 to 16 damage in that turn cycle, and if they give you any cards, they can't clear the Miragai.
I think you mentioned something important there, which is fitting the curve nicely is because you pitch a blue to attack with Miragai, that's 1, leaves you with 2 floating, then you follow up with, Command and Conquer or whatever. The reason we're not on some alternatives that we've looked at, like Barrage and Braunhide or Blanche, is because they don't let you swing Miragai and then also attack with them, only pitching 1 card, which makes them a lot less desirable for a deck like this.
Yeah, the only 3 costs we're playing is Phantasmaclasm because that card is crazy.
It busted, yeah. So the next red suite that we have here is our hand extenders, our go-agains. This is Enlightened Strike and Red Spears of Surreality. Now, E-Strike, I think, started as a sideboard card, and it essentially, I think we're just playing 3 all the time now, right?
Yeah, so in my mind, this is like the typical Waxing Spectre slot.
Yeah.
And they fulfill really similar roles to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, Waxing is a 4 go again with 3 on defense, and then E-Strike can be a 5 go again with nothing on defense, which sometimes those breakpoints matter, but you can also just send it for 7, which can just like win an endgame.
I have likened this card a lot to Waxing Spectre, except it blocks 3 from hand, which
it does block 3 from hand. Yeah.
When you're trying to defend something, like when we're going all in on Miragai, that defending 3 from hand is really important.
Is pretty good. Yeah. It's also, I think, better notably in the Kano matchup, because your Waxing Spectre can just get blown up off the top, and if you send an E-Strike for 5 go again, they are both going to leak 2 damage usually. Like, they don't give you 2 cards for this.
Never.
And you have this, you can continue the turn.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's not obvious about Enlightened Strike, and this kind of harkens back to Bolander Icelander, if any of our viewers watch that, because this doesn't care about what color of card is bottomed, it lets you get away with playing fewer blues and still having, like, offensive turns that do anything, which we found to be really important to fit all of these red cards into the deck.
You draw a full red hand, and then you can E-Strike for 5 go again, send Metamorph for 7, like pitching a red. And that's still just your 12 value, so it helps smooth out the turn cycles a lot.
Spear's not nearly as good, kind of a necessary evil for Kano right now. 1 for 5 go again, and what Kano in their right mind is running poppers, because they're so full of whiffs already with Kindle. It's
funny
just,
you say that,
well,
because
yeah.
I was popped by a Wounded Bull by Peter. But
I think yes. Peter and Majin Bey both actually did have poppers, but perhaps not stock right now. It's a fine card.
And still, if they're running the poppers, it's harder for them to just go off mid-game and like trust that they're going to hit a spell on top.
Our next class of cards are D-Reacts, Sink Below, Fate Foreseen, That All You Got. I don't really think there's anything like exciting to say about these. They defend really well.
I think a couple more callouts is Sink also helps you cheat on your blue count a bit. You can
Yes.
bottom an all red hand and trust that you're drawing a blue, or go for it at least. And then D-React's great with this game plan and helps into a lot of matchups just like that. Try to either dominate to clear your mirror guy or go for attack reactions. Like they're fantastic into new.
Our last 2 red attack actions are kind of the overrate illusionist, non-talented stuff. This is Miraging Metamorph and Phantasmaclasm. So Phantasmaclasm is just a ridiculous card.
I tend to just be playing these in that sort of damage trading stage of the game, either start or end of the game, where you're either with Metamorph, you block 3 cards and then Tunic Metamorph, and you've just done a 16 value turn cycle. Good job. And same with Phantasmaclasm, you block 2 cards, and then you do a 15 value turn cycle with minor disruption or major disruption if you take their thing, which both of those are just crazy.
Yeah. I think Phantasmaclasm is quite good. I know that it creates some individual feels bads when they do draw the popper off the top, but statistically, luck is on your side.
Just to call out a fun spot from Nats with Phantasmaclasm was I got to see a news hand bottom one of their cards and saw that they kept a Siren's Call, and then next turn I draw a single blue and Mirror Guy, which normally if they Siren's Call me there, I have no counterplay. I'm just gonna either lose the Mirror Guy or I have to cast it for low value. But because I knew about it, I got to block with Traverse, get my Chi, cast the Mirror Guy, and then pitch my other blue to Uphold, and just blank their Siren's Call, stick a Mirror Guy with 5 health.
That's crazy, and deny them the card draw.
You also just get the knowledge. You get to see their hand, which is just
hand
a really
info.
powerful thing.
Not easy to equate to like a numerical value, but definitely useful in the middle of the game.
Yeah. Same with Weakest Link. Sometimes you'll send it for 6 and it has no text, but you get to see their hand.
I think there is one important call out here with Miraging Metamorph. We don't have a lot of targets for it. It's just Spectral Shield, Rage Spectre, and Mirror Guy, of course. That's kind of okay though. Oh, it can also copy your Ponders, which is really hilarious.
Or your Blood Rot. Be careful of that.
Or
Don't
your
get
Blood Rot. I think it tends to be okay because your ideal scenario is playing this off of Tunic, and so if they pop it, there's still trading card for card, so like you're not down a terrible lot at that point. But it is something to keep in mind. Like maybe, I guess this is like on the chopping block, maybe eventually.
Yeah, I do think it is the best thing to have when you just naturally draw your Mirror Guy, because you get to pitch a blue to swing with Mirror Guy is one resource, Uphold as the second resource, and then this as the third. And they can't pop it because then you get a second Mirror Guy. I mean, they can,
cannot
but sure. But yeah, so that it's extremely powerful in that particular scenario.
And then perhaps the spiciest piece of disruption in the list, which this card has been a roller coaster for me because I thought Dissolve Reality was atrocious when I first read it. But it turns out, if all you care about is A, taking away your opponent's combo card that they have arsenal, like Aether Wildfire, if you want to do that, or you have something that you want to protect on the board, and so minimizing damage output this turn and delaying their 5-card hand until next turn, that's also extremely powerful, and there's no play around it unless they can like play their arsenal as an instant.
This has won me a ton of endgames too, where you're like trading 2 cards for 2 cards, and then suddenly you're just like, okay, you get a 1-card hand this turn, or like instead of your 3, you get a 2-card hand, and we've delayed it a turn, except now I get to keep an even bigger grip. Ponders are fantastic for us. I mean, you can take a look through this list, but any red card or yellow card, you are thrilled to put in Arsenal.
Yeah.
And then most of these blues are totally fine. Every unflipped Chi is amazing. Everything is like fine to good up until This Round's on Me and Warmongers. Those would be the only 2 that like are questionable in some matchups. But even into like KO, all Arsenal Warmongers, right? Stop their Blood Rush, maybe. This Round's on Me is maybe a little more matchup dependent. But generally speaking, Ponders are great for us and not always great for your opponent. So it's not like the Arsenal gets replaced fairly 1-for-1.
Yeah.
And often they put really good cards in their arsenal that you just get to swap with like a random card from their deck.
So moving on to the blues, we'll start with the obvious, the Chi, the Transcend cards. We have something very noticeable here. There's no Sacred Art, and we're playing Path Well Traveled. So what went wrong?
We can go through like the evolution of our Chi, I think. So we started with the standard, like typical 6 plus Sacred Art as the 7th. And we were playing the deck, and then it was just like, every time you play Sacred Art, we don't have other things to put counters on. So you're basically paying a full card if everything lines up perfectly. If you get the double chi and get to do all the modes, you're paying a full card for 2 shields with +1 counters on it, which is like fine. Like that is good value. I think it's quite strong in the mirror, but
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
not what we want to be doing.
Yeah.
It's not like part of this core game plan of just send the mirror guy. And then it's really card intensive. It doesn't block. You can't like cleanly arsenal it and still hope to do the mirror guy thing. Yeah, so we chopped that off.
We needed a replacement for that because you talked earlier about you weren't able to transcend early in one of your games. The way this deck loses the most is it doesn't have chi available when it wants to traverse. And so the answer was just, why don't we play more chi? Why don't we play more chi? And so we ended up on every transcend card that is not the Sacred Art. I think actually you found a lot of interesting pathway traveled lines too.
Yeah, and we kept sort of creeping it up because I started on blue sinks actually. It was Rhea's idea here to like, that's what I replaced this Sacred Art with, thinking that it still lets you transcend and you can filter towards mirror guy and all that. But then every time I drew a sink, I was just like, this is just better as chi. Even if it's these like +1s or go agains that don't matter that much. So worth noting, with path well traveled and grain that tips the scale, you're often just targeting your opponent's attacks in the appropriate step. So
in the resolution or link steps, yes. So
yeah,
they don't
link
get any
steps
benefit.
for path well traveled.
Yes.
Yep. But yeah, you can do some fun stuff with your own cards with it too. It's especially either +1 or go again is insane when you do it with Levels of Enlightenment. You can do some fun stuff with your Rage Specters on either of those.
Rage Spectre Path Well Traveled is really good. If you ever
draw double chi and like a red attack, you can like send a CNC and then double chi it, give it go again, and then ideally have another red thing to follow up. Yeah. So it lines up a little more than you think. But
E-Strike Draw double chi is a pretty nice
draw
line
double
as well.
chi. Yep.
So okay, we have a bunch of chi. We have ostensibly a pile of blue 3 blocks, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
kind of.
I think the ones that aren't 3 blocks are things that help us transcend. So it's basically, it ups the count to 12 with the 1 sink below and the 3 hold the lines. That like 12 ways to like transcend on your opponent's turn. You just need to draw 2 of them, which is not terribly hard if you do the math on that.
And we played the 1 blue sink. The Twitter meme of the Belize blue sinkhole happened, and guys, that was blue sinkhole as in blue sink. I know that it was interpreted as deep blue sea. That's my bad. I didn't look for any potential secondary meanings. I promise I was not psyoping. We did register blue sink below.
We did. We did not test deep blue sea, but maybe next time.
Maybe next time. Hey, it's pummelable.
It is pummelable. Huh.
Yeah.
So it costs 4, right? That sounds like 2 blues and a pummel to me.
Yeah. So these blue D-reacts essentially are just allowing us to transcend easier, like you said. We have a pile of blue block 3s. I think emblematic here is Enigma Chimera, which we were legally obliged to play because it has Enigma in the name, funnily enough.
That's right.
No, I think so. Enigma Chimera, Spears of Surreality. Spectral Prowler was on our list in and out. We ended up going with Second Tenet of Chi Wind over it. These are all just like cards that are not embarrassing to play in terms of rate, like 2 card 6s, or they have Go Again, which we found very important for Kano.
And just to call out Second Tenet of Chi, I'm really high on that card. It's so 3 blues, right? If you have Second Tenet, any other blue, and a Chi, the rate is like fine. You get to play it, and then you transcend, and then you make a shield and attack. So you attack for 7, and you've set up a ward 1. That's a 3-card 8 with all blues. That's like sending a Thunderquake when you're Guardian, which is like, not great, but fine.
That's a great comparison, yeah.
It does the thing, right?
It is our Thunderquake.
So I've been really happy with that card.
All right, let's talk about what we all came here to talk about. Let's talk about Mirror Guy. So,
indeed.
I mean,
Big
it's
dragon.
just Hidden Dragon. It is what we made the deck list about. What more is there to say?
Yeah, draw this card, put it in your arsenal, and wait for the Chi. Or put Chi in your arsenal and wait for this card. And then if you draw one of that but not the other, take an IP1 and try again next turn.
Yeah.
is generally how I'd go about it.
It is actually that good. So I feel like everyone knows...
It is that good.
I feel like everyone knows Mirror Guy is great. I think Rage Spectre is like... A lot of people look at this as the bread and butter card in Enigma. But we found that, like, if you're not finding your Mirror Guy, it's perfectly acceptable to just uphold your Rage Spectre and just say, you know what, 1 resource for 7 is almost 1 resource for 10, and we're doing this now.
Yeah, and then you still have your mirror guys in the pocket for later. Notably, this takes no chi. You can just do it.
Takes
anytime.
no chi. It enables Transcend really easily. Very strong with Path Well Traveled, as we mentioned. Well, I feel like Miragai is the best card in the deck, but I really feel like Rage Spectre is like emblematic of what the deck wants to do. Because at the end of the day, it's a blue block 3 that is also a 2-card 7, which is insane.
Yeah. And I think with Rage Spectre, it's a lot easier. So Miragai, you just sort of take it as it comes, because you're specifically not traversing for Miragai with this list. So you're waiting for your double chi, and sometimes you don't have disruption. You just like send Miragai and then maybe an Enigma Chimera or something because you drew all blues. With Rage Spectre, you can really choose your spot because it doesn't take chi, it doesn't take anything else. So you can like Rage Spectre, Dissolve Reality, Weakest Link. Just send this huge disruptive turn as you're slapping down this huge ward with a go again for future turns. So if they can't answer it immediately, they're going to get slapped for 7, go again next turn.
And then our last kind of little pocket of blues here are kind of our disruptive blues. So the best of these is Warmonger's Diplomacy. We also have This Round's on Me, which we're trying to combine with other disruption, like Command and Conquer against ninjas. And Dense Blue Mist, which is a sideboard card that I've been falling out of love with. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think it's certainly very cuttable. I think it's part of this current list package into Zen, where there are 17 effects that he really cares about, which is the Amnesia, CNC, Phantasmaclasm, Weakest Link, Dissolve Reality, plus these 2 blue mists.
Yeah.
And when you have 17, you got to be sending 1 every turn, and like if you draw 2 of them, you arsenal 1, and I think this is just a good critical mass to really smooth out making sure you have disruption all of the time.
Yeah.
And casting this off Tunic is basically disruption, because if they go 8 chain links wide, then this kind of like took a card from their hand, or you got 8 value from it.
Yeah, the wider your opponent goes, the better this is. Also, Rip combo Bolton, because this card just stops them in their traps. Not that was a deck anyways.
Pretty good there.
I do think Warmonger's Diplomacy is warranting a little discussion, because the matchups where this card is good in are kind of the one exception to where we are happy proactively traversing for Miragai Chi, right? Because you ever pair Miragai with Warmonger's Diplomacy, wow, some decks just cannot deal with that. Azalea comes to mind, Vincent comes to mind, Dash, if they were undisciplined and they didn't load their induction chambers going into their turn. It gets really ugly really fast.
I think that's a great point, and a big way to play those matchups. Yeah. So this plan of getting double chi Miragai is most of the time, and then it's for these specific matchups where Warmongers is great, we'll traverse for it, and into the ninjas you can traverse for your Miragai because it's not going to live these multiple turns.
Yeah, it's not going to survive anyways. Absolutely. So that's kind of the deck list. You can see some noticeable exclusions. There's no special manifestations. We don't have anything to combine it with, and a 2-card 5 is not a great rate. We don't have cats, we don't have 10k, because we're not looking to have to set up payoffs like that. We just want to play efficient cards. And there's no Spectra here. We had them in the list for a long time, but the anti-synergy with Rage Spectre, which again is just like mini Miragai frequently, was too big of a downside.
Yeah, 2 blocks as well.
2 blocks as well, which we really like blocking 3 in this deck.
Yeah.
It's mini Guardian for a reason. So that's the list. We've addressed some of them already, but let's just briefly go over kind of like the top of the meta and how we're playing into them. So the Boogeyman, you mentioned we have 17 disruptive effects for Zen. Just really looking to play one of those every turn and not letting him have his gigantic pop-off turn.
You cannot let him do that. He does get to once a game throw all his armor if he wants to block 7 on something, which usually is enough to stop your waves, or your waves that give the +1. So they do get 1 turn. Ideally, you have your blue mist for that, but also you're like pressuring them the rest of the game. Sometimes they'll give you the shoes to just make a tiger at some point, and then they can no longer block 7. But yeah, you want to be chaining these effects. And worth noting, we have Sync, Fate, and That All You Got to draw us to those effects faster. You get to Opt, you get to Sync, so it's very consistent to be able to cast one of these per turn.
I think
I'd rate them like Amnesia, top effect, for sure.
Okay.
Don't waves that one, because if they're giving you 2 cards, their turn's probably already, they're just sending a CNC or something at you. probably weakest link next. They need the like
so.
combo piece in their arsenal, but otherwise it's extremely crushing.
Yeah, and they play Matt's Chi, so that the odds that they have in their blocking hand every turn with 9 Transcend cards and 3 Artivores is just like very reasonably high.
It's quite high. And if they don't have it in hand, it has to be an arsenal. And if it's not an arsenal either, you're not getting comboed off. That's okay too. And they can't like block this with Traverse to find their Chi, and because then now they have a Chi in hand that's an on hit, so they have to give you more cards or more armor. I think, and then like CNC next, and Dissolve Reality. I think those are sort of equal. And then Phantasmaclasm's the worst one because it's big damage, which is great, but it sometimes isn't disruptive enough, or sometimes you just fix their hand for them.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I will say I feel like I have an unreasonably high rate of playing Plasm and getting to take their Artivore, which is always the best
always
feeling.
feels good. Or you take their one cheat card and then suddenly their turn's a lot worse. And I think part of this is like we're just playing this like a value matchup. You're just sending those disruptive effects, and then they have a number of 2-blocks and things. So even though your attacks are slightly below rate, they like get above rate by forcing them to do below rate things on their end, and you just grind them out with the value. At some point, you'll draw a Mirror Guy and you'll Traverse to find the Chi and cast that, and you're not planning to protect it. It's just it's the 8 attack on offense and then 4 or less on defense, and you just play a math game against them, trying never to let them pop off.
Importantly, so we are playing Meridian in this matchup. Just get 2 to 3 block out of it whenever you can, because we're not defensively traversing. Footsteps, not really that good. We're not pitching on our opponent's turn, and we would rather hold Tunic for our Dense Blue Mists or Miraging Metamorphs or whatever.
And it like blocks okay with your Dense Blue Mist, so you get like 2 block out of it total, but Pathway blocks 3.
Yeah.
So.
Much better.
And sometimes you'll draw double Chi and just you want to convert one of them to 4 block on defense with Pathway plus your hero power.
Yeah.
And then the other one becomes a shield on offense to attack for 2 and then defend for 1 later.
I think the other ninjas are trying to similar game plans as well, so you can just take this advice and translate it to them. Zen is just the scariest of the bunch, so we're specifically focusing on him.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. Like I got a Phi with the in the Battle Hardened with the CNC Aqua Lapse.
Oh yeah.
So it not Aqua Lapse, the Waves, the one that gives
Waves,
+1.
Yeah. Brutes, and we'll focus on KO because it just kind of is the most consistent brute right now. So this is a defensive Traverse matchup, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. So the only way, I mean, maybe not the only way, like maybe KO can pop off with a Sash turn, but they basically need to respond to your Mirror Guy with Blood Rush in order to clear it. Otherwise, even if they do their crazy KO thing, which is like a Wild Ride for 7 into Claw for 3 into Swing Big, that's like 20, you can reasonably defend that with your Traverse and the boots and your full hand block. Like it is possible to survive that sequence and still get to swing with Mirror Guy again, especially if you have a D-React set in Arsenal.
Ideally, their Groadian can be face up because they like to make agilities. So if you can, wait until they find a turn cycle without an agility to pop off. I know that's not always an option, but preferable if you can wait until that happens.
Yeah, and you can see the game plan in the game that I was featured in. It didn't work because I was getting destroyed.
Well, I mean,
but yeah, I was basically just blocking out. I arsenaled the Mirror Guy like turn 0, and I was just waiting for the Chi. And you just gotta block, force KO to like do the thing, force him to have go again every turn. And if not, he has to roll scabs, or if they're on beaten trackers, they need to find all that. And I don't want to be trading cards for cards. Like blocking 2 and then sending a CNC is like sometimes okay, but often they're happy to block 2, or they have this whole fridge of armor that they can use. You really just want to protect your life total and do this double Mirror Guy swing. Watch out for Reckless Swing. Turn on your boots swing on your own turn if you can. If you're pitching the Chi to play Mirror Guy on your turn, activate the ward.
Yes, it's a great point, because if your attacking ally dies, no action point.
Yeah. Yeah, if you take 2 damage and you can't ward it, you lose the Mirror Guy and your turn. And watch out for Fleshbag too if you're planning a follow-up to Mirror Guy.
Yeah.
Ideally, you can either have like 2 disruptive threats, so if one gets Fleshbagged, it's fine, or there are creative ways to play around it, but just look for those spots.
Next up, we have Azalea, who I think is kind of underrated at the moment in the meta. She obviously just won her calling, but. Surprising lack of them in Nats, I feel. This matchup is scary for traditional Enigmas. because they play their Wax Inspector, they play the Restless Coalescence, they have like 3 Spectral Shields, and Azalea's like dominated a Murkmire Grapnel. GG?
Lose your whole board, take $1 million.
Yeah, lose your whole board, take $1 million. Because this Hidden Dragon deck list is not all in on just committing to the board state, and because we are specifically trying to combine Warmonger's Diplomacy and Miragai on the same turn cycle, I kind of think it's surprisingly fine. Like, Azalea hates blocking our disruptive stuff. It means that she doesn't have arrows to attack with, and we're pretty happy to just like block 9 a bunch and attack with Mirage and Metamorph or whatever.
Yeah, CNC great. Phantasmaclasm is so good. It's kind of a damage race where you're losing the damage race because Azalea is like this hyper efficient deck that pushes through these on hits, and then you get to do this Miragai Warmongers thing where you attack for 10, and then they have almost a non-turn, or they get to send their arrow for like 9 because of their long draw, and then you block 9, and then you get to attack with Miragai again. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And then
then you sort of even the life totals, and I feel like it often ends up in an end game, sort of where I was saying before, where we're at like 5 to 10 life, but then Azalea has to start giving you cards from hand, and then her power really drops.
Riptide is kind of the same deal. Make as many Spectral Shields as you can and defend them so that when you do commit to Miragai, they can't kill Miragai with trap ping damage. Typically you want 2 shields and Uphold Tradition. If they have 4 traps, good for them.
And same thing, if you're casting Miragai in your own turn, turn on the boots. Let that take the trap instead of
absolutely.
Miragai. Same for Azalea and Bloodrot. Occasionally, you get hit and you have to go for Miragai this turn because you've drawn it in Warmongers. You can use your boots to ward the Bloodrot because we're not doing the defensive traverse. So your boots can just be a ward 3 at any point in the game.
So the mirror. So how does this go? I know we played the mirror a lot against the like more traditional lists. I feel like it's surprisingly even. While
I don't feel like one list is favored over the other.
Yeah, because they can make a board state easier, but they also can't protect their board state easier because they're playing all of these 2 blocks and no blocks.
I think the E strike for 5 go again is quite good.
Very
that
real
5
here.
versus 4 is a big deal in this mirror.
I do kind of feel like this has just turned into a staring match, kind of. Whoever traverses second, I feel, is very strongly favored to win, because so like both players get access to a big pop-off turn where they get to do something really flashy, like play a Miragai for 10 or whatever. But whoever does it second is also getting I kill my opponent's board stapled onto my big flashy thing. And board state means a lot in this matchup.
Yeah. I think the way I sort of conceptualize it is like your equipment is your power and your answer to clear a board. So like a way to get back in the game, if your opponent has a board of like ward 5 and a full grip of cards, a way to clear that is like Rage Spectre, give it go again, CNC. But you've burned a piece of equipment to do that. And same thing with Traverse. You can draw an extra card and go off with a 6-card hand to push against their board state. But as you start dropping these equipment pieces, you can't clear effectively. And so whoever tends to be winning, like once all the equipment is off the board, the game can sort of snowball from there. And life total is sort of not real until you're at 0. Like you can, the best way, or like the way to lose is, they're coming at you with Miragai and you're trying to play efficiently. What you need to do is arsenal a go again card, take all the damage, set up your 5-card hand, and just like push as much as you can to get rid of that Miragai.
The other illusionist, and a very controversial matchup. What's your matchup ratio percentage on Prism right now? What do you think?
I think we're unfavored with this list, but I have not played enough games, and every game goes so wildly differently that it's hard to tell what actually mattered.
I think I tend to agree. I think it's like a 40-60 in Prism's favor, but individual games feel like 90-10s in one person's direction or the other. Like I don't think there's a close game between Prism and Enigma.
And not to give all the Prisms the tech, but don't play Rapture.
Don't play Rapture. It's
our
awful.
list will crush the Rapture matchup.
Yeah.
You need to be on Vestige and doing either a loop or a set up a billion Spectra, a billion Angels, like whatever it is. That is the way that Prism can at least push through our list. I don't know what's more favored into more traditional Enigmas.
I think in general Vestige ends up being better, which I don't think is really
as well.
caught on yet, which is interesting.
The thing to note, this is the one matchup where you can actually activate Meridian Pathway. If they start looping you or set up an ALS and you need to get through, you need to have no wards on board, but you can activate Pathway with a chi, play a Rage Spectre, and you'll get 2 action points. And you can kill ALS and then kill something else.
It's important to like Arsenal Rage Spectre if they look like they are setting up for the loop. And then you always have the opportunity to traverse, because looping inherently means attacking you with angels. So you're going to have the chi if you have it in your deck.
And then you'll have the Chi, the Rage Spectre, and then like a couple other cards. So sometimes you can even like E-Strike Go Again, Tunic Metamorph afterwards and clear 3 things.
Okay. The other controversial one, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. So what is the super secret anti-Kano tech? Because every Kano figured out, oh, we just play Waning Moon, and we stacked them, and Enigma doesn't have enough Go Again to kill us before we hit our triple Wildfire pitch stack or whatever.
So you need the Go Again, which is on Uphold Tradition. So that is our non-AB spot.
Yeah.
So if you play a Rage Spectre and then attack with it, if they decide to give you 2 cards, you can then give it Go Again, and either they have to like try to go off and clear this Rage Spectre with their last 2 cards that they've held, which can often be just like a blue and a red. Like maybe they held their like blue in their Scalding Rain because they want to clear this Rage Spectre on their turn. So now they're off the top trying to rip like I don't know what you can find, right? You need to like have 2 blues to be able to send a spell and the Waning Moon, or like pop an E-Pot or something, and then you're taking resources from their combo.
And specifically, they need a spell and the Waning Moon, or something that's 5 damage or more, because you just flipped Uphold Tradition. So as long as you have a blue in hand, for one instance, you have a functional AB4 after the ward 1 on Uphold Tradition, which is really important.
It's so good to just have it face down too, because they almost like have to stack you. If they just try to combo you in the mid game, you have access to AB4 as long as you've held your Uphold and you're holding enough cards. Like at least they have to respect it in their mind that you might AB4 their Wildfire. That only comes in for 5 because they're not in Crucible. And so then you can just really blank their combo turn, which makes me really comfortable dropping life. Like I will regularly go to like 15 against a Kano. Yeah. And you're still safe in the combo most of the time.
Most of the time. Sometimes they always have it. Sometimes they have their Kindle 40 damage.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to push as much Go Again as possible. So Spears, Levels of Enlightenment, even just your Spectral Shields with the 2 Go Again, and then they become, some ward on defense. But don't block a lot. Really just try to send 4 to 5 card hands at them every turn and pressure their life total, especially if you notice them stacking you.
We kind of saved an easy one as we get later and later here. Sorry, new fans. This matchup is very good for Enigma, and especially good when our deck blocks so well.
So that all you got on a dagger is just crazy.
It's
deny
insane.
They're on hit, you draw a card. Sometimes you protect things. Sometimes they play Codex and you draw the card before the end of the turn and get to block with it. It's very, very good.
Really, the only card that you're watching out for here as Enigma is Siren's Call plus Command and Conquer. That's how they can rip apart your Mirror Dice either in hand or in arsenal. But really, I mean, stick a Mirror Die, flip up Old Tradition, then you have Traverse and Meridian Pathways. They have a really hard time breaking through those hands. They just don't have the offensive output, kind of similar to Guardians, which... Rip Guardians, you didn't even make the list of things to talk about.
Yeah. Watch out for Vambrace. I find I'm often blocking with... So after the Mirror Guy turn, I've drawn my 4 cards. I'm often blocking with Traverse on that first dagger so that they can't Vambrace me. And then I have my Chi. And then the second dagger comes in. And if they want to commit the Vambrace there, then I can make the Spectral Shield. Yep. And I'll ward it with Spectral Shield plus Uphold Tradition and still have the ward 3 on the boots alive. So just, be careful of Vambrace, be careful of attack reactions. On the other side, before Mirror Guy hits the board, just be aware of this interaction where things like CNC or Weakest Link, you can take the damage and then respond to the on-hit trigger. So you can take the damage of CNC, but before your arsenal gets destroyed, you can cast it if you have Mirror Guy sitting there. Don't do it if they have Go Again, or unless you can block it. But if it's just CNC and the turn's about to end, you can do that and get your Mirror Guy out and still survive.
Very important interaction. You can do the same thing in response to the Weakest Link hit trigger as well, if you need to pitch a Chi from hand or whatever.
Yeah, I find this comes up most against new because they have Leave No Witnesses, CNC, Weakest Link, like all this stuff that that has on hits, say Bonds of Agony, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the last hero that's kind of like floating around the meta right now is Dash Inventor Extraordinaire. I know she just recently won the Singapore Battle Harden. She was in the top 8 of the calling. I think there's kind of a consensus that the hybrid boost plus control plan is the best thing that Dash should be doing right now. I think we eat pistol control for breakfast. I think the matchup is not close. I played that during Nats, and it was not pretty. I don't know, boost can be more concerning, but I think that we've found our Guardian deck that's a pile of block 3s. Guess what it does well?
Yeah, it blocks pretty good. Yeah, I think you really have to respond to what Dash is doing. We run the footsteps in this matchup against T-Bone,
Yes.
and if they want a pistol shot a bunch, like on a high octane turn, and they close the chain a bunch, it blocks a lot. And if they're boosting really aggressively, you can play sort of a soft fatigue game where maybe you get to an end game where they're a pile of blues, and you can end the game from there. If they're trying to set up these big turns, you can punish them with power on hits, like CNC, Weakest Link, because they run items. It's one of those matchups where you want to think about when you traverse, very importantly. I think this is probably one where you traverse for the Mira guy because we don't have the ward boots on defense. Yeah, and also your traverse might get blown up on turn 2 by a bunch of T-bones, so don't be too...
That does happen sometimes, unfortunately. It's not great. I do think Mechanologist in general is perhaps the one class outside of Ninja that we play Waves of Aquamarine. The only mechs that play D-Reacts are Slapdash, the slow control deck, and we beat that anyways. The boost aggro decks, we have several disruptive on-hits that they really care about not hitting. We just link and Command and Conquer. And because they're boost, there are no D-Reacts in Mechanologist cards, so you can really safely push that on-hit through after they've committed their normal blocks.
Often you can even get more than 1 point on defense, because if they have to close the chain to load pistol or to play a Spark of Genius mid-turn, whatever it is, you can block more than once.
That's breaking the chain. Absolutely, yeah. So that's the deck list. That's how you play the deck, and that's kind of what we're doing in each matchup. What changes here, Brian? What underperformed? What are we looking to add to the deck? Because I don't know about you. I saw Microphone's top 8 Battle Harden list, and I think this card might be
cool.
This card might be very real. I think red pummel is.
I'm definitely ready to explore pummel in red and or blue. We tested some, certainly blue pummel going into the event. I didn't feel like there were quite enough targets, and it was a little clunky. But yeah, I mean, it can, CNC pummel off of Tunic is, we know, is just one of the craziest value plays you can make in Flesh and Blood at all. So.
More Guardian play lines.
That's right. I think Pummel's something to explore. It's definitely 2 blocks, so that's a little scary. But
it is a 2 block, but between Enlightened Strike and 4 Sync Belows and Rise and Sun Setting Moon, I think you have ways to tuck it if it's not going to be performing on the turn cycle.
Yeah, I think that's totally a card to explore. I think there's loads of room for movement in the blues. I think you can make a case to cut This Round's on Me. As much as I love Second Tenant Wind, that could maybe be a cut. I've seen First Tenant Moon in some lists where you can like draw a card. That can be pretty cool.
That's so last week, Brian. That's so last week.
I know. Spectral Prowler, I see up on the screen. Yeah,
I do think Spectral Prowler is quite promising. It's the next best blue go again attack. And 0 cost to kill Spectra is, like in the Prism matchup, I think is actually very real. I don't know. I mean, I might want the 3rd Red Spears as a reality, but the list is pretty tight.
Yeah, I think at this point there are maybe like 120 like great cards for Enigma, and you pick your 80 of them. Yeah. And the correct list might involve Cats and Spectral Manifestations and maybe 10k. I'm totally open to that being the like optimal way that she ends up being played. So I think there's lots of directions to explore. And you can make a hybrid of those lists, right? Like cut all the D-Reacts for that package, and then you still have the disruption, but plus that maybe high rolly but 2 block potential. Or you can maybe go even further in this direction, start adding unmovables, right? Like I think there's a lot to explore here.
Absolutely. I do think the lists that are kind of a blend between this and what we saw last week on the channel with Noah Karp's list, there's a lot of potential there, and I think it is worth exploring. Aaron, I know, top 8'd US Nats with something like that. Having the amnesias and command and conquers and really trying to be disruptive, but also those, Enigma power cards, we'll say. I don't know. I'm just addicted to Mirror Drive 10 at this point, and I think I'm maybe playing something like Hidden Dragon for the foreseeable future until someone else cracks it.
Yeah, it's pretty, the rush you get when you get to cast a Mirror Guide, and then you get to block, and then you just go Tunic 10 again.
10? Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good. It's pretty fun.
It's pretty good.
I guess, I mean, we're a little late, but maybe that's one thing we didn't mention. Ideally, you want to be casting your Mirror Guide when your Tunic is on 2 or 3, so that when it comes back to your turn on the next cycle, you can just Tunic Mirror Guide.
Yes. Very important. It's how you extract max value out of the turn cycles, and it's kind of what makes the deck truly unfair, I think. That's it. We talked through the whole list. That's your primer to play Hidden Dragon. Guardian Refugees, because that class is unfortunately underperforming. Welcome. We welcome you with open arms.
That's
it's
right.
going to feel
One
very
more shout
familiar.
out to Dagan.
One more shout out to Dagan, who also played this list
couldn't
with
join us today, but he's a Guardian player, and we got him on the list. I was like, hey, it's a bunch of 3 blocks, and he was like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah. He tried Victor for a bit. I think we played this into him once, and he was like, oh, that's just my list, but better. And we were like, yes, it is. Come join us.
Yeah. And against the Victor at Nats, I think my Mirror Guy attacked 4 times, and that's just kind of how that goes. You just arsenal your D-React, you have your, equipment suite as a D-React, and it is really hard for him to push over.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed this alternative take on Enigma. I'm sure that there will be many, many more deck techs and variations in the future, but for now, I'm Rhea. This has been my teammate Brian, and thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time.